Once more, please give rise to the motivation of bodhicitta and listen with that motivation. So please give rise to bodhicitta and listen with the motivation of bodhicitta. We'll continue where we left off. We were talking about worldly objects of refuge. Now we move on to supreme objects of refuge. These refer to the three jewels taken as objects of refuge by worldly people who merely want to be protected from fear and to better their lot. So these are referred to. This is describing two types of mundane motivation with which people can take refuge. Namely, taking refuge motivated by the wish to be protected from fear, the fear of this life, illness and so on, and also the fear of the lower realms and to better their lot, to gain good fortune and so on. So actually there are stories we could tell to illustrate these two types of refuge. I'll tell them in short. So at Buddha's time, there was someone who had stolen, who had been a thief. And there were two young men who had stolen, and they'd been caught. And the punishment at that time was death. One was punished by death for stealing. So the mother of these two boys was very smart. He told them, go off to Buddha, go and take refuge in Buddha Shakyamuni. And she requested Buddha to accept her two sons and protect them, because at the time there was an exemption for monastics. Monks or followers of the Buddha were exempt from punishment by death and other certain punishments. And so they went to Buddha. This was a very smart plan, right, to save their lives. They became followers of Buddha, became monks, and then they were exempt from the death penalty. So this is one example of taking refuge in the three jewels in order to be protected from fear. So this is mentioned, I think, in Nushin Dhammashiri's commentary on the three vows. In certain texts, anyway, this is mentioned. I read the whole Kangyo once, very thoroughly, beginning to end. And I noted down stories as I went along with the help of my attendant Kyabne. So I have one or two thick notebooks full of notations about the stories from Buddha Shakyamuni. And these stories are wonderful to tell and relate. But these days I just don't really have the time or maybe the energy to go through them and refresh my memory of them. Likewise, I have thick notebooks full of notes I've made about some very difficult points, clarifications of difficult points in the teachings. These would be, anyway, good and helpful things to relate, but the story I just mentioned very briefly is found in the Buddhist words, the Kangyo. So previously we were talking about inferior refuges, so similarly people with mundane motivations such as this, but taking refuge in inferior refuges such as mountains and fortresses. Here we have the instance of people taking refuge in superior objects, the three jewels, but with these mundane motivations. So the motivation of wishing to be protected from fear and to better their lot. So an example of someone taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha in order to better their lot is Ananda, Buddha's cousin Ananda, who one day he was a layperson, and one day Buddha took him up to the heaven realms with his miraculous power, and having seen all the pleasure that the gods get to enjoy up in the heavens, then he then decided to follow the Buddha and become a monk, so that he could create the merit, the causes for rebirth in the god realms. So he wasn't motivated by renunciation and the wish to be free from samsara, but just the wish to better his lot in his future life. Now, supramundane objects of refuge. So, What we were just talking about is supreme refuges in the sense of the three jewels taken as objects of refuge by worldly people who merely want to be protected from fear to better their lot. So taking refuge in inanimate things such as mountains and fortresses or powerful non-human beings, these are inferior refuges. And then taking refuge in the supreme refuges, namely the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, but with a mundane motivation. This is another type of worldly object of refuge. Worldly refuge. So now we come to supramundane objects of refuge. So the objects of refuge for those who strive for complete liberation are the three jewels, who have the power temporarily to protect us from psychic existence and ultimately to establish us in ultimate excellence. What is meant by ultimate excellence is the ultimate excellence of nirvana, freedom from samsara, the state of liberation, or nirvana, freedom from samsara, and then the supreme ultimate excellence, which is the state of perfect Buddhahood. So here one understands that samsara, the whole of samsara, lower and higher realms, both are full of suffering. There is no satisfaction or real happiness to be found there. So therefore I must free myself from the fears of samsara and attain ultimate excellence, liberation and enlightenment. And with this motivation, one takes refuge. The three jewels are identified differently according to the different categories of greater and lesser vehicles. As the great master has said, as Guru Rinpoche has said, samsaric lords, however good, will let us down. No matter how good they are, at some point they'll let us down. We see this as politicians. Right? They can't be relied upon. Sometimes they help you, but then other times they don't. They're swayed by their own preferences and so on. Samsaric lords, however good, they'll let us down. In the end, they will deceive us. As objects of refuge, the three jewels, on the other hand, will never fail. They are undeceiving, unfailing. They will never deceive you. They will never cheat you. So it said the Buddha is unfailing, he is undeceiving. It said there could come a time where the earth transforms, where the earth and sky themselves transform and change, but Buddha himself will never change. Buddha is unchanging and undeceiving. Because Buddha has no cause for deception. The cause for deception are the afflictions of attachment, aversion and ignorance. This is where all deception, all dishonesty comes from, right? Motivations, intentions stemming from attachment, from aversion, from ignorance. That's why people lie while they deceive others, because they have hope and fear, right, stemming from these emotions. Like if a lama tells a spiritual lie, claims that they have some achievement they don't, well, that's because it's motivated by greed, right? The desire for gain or fame and so on. Likewise, in mundane context, when people lie, it's because they want something, right? They're motivated either by greed or by hatred. Think about it. Any lie, all lies stem from afflictions, either from greed or from anger or from ignorance. And Buddha is completely free from such afflictions. He is completely unstained by the afflictions, by attachment, aversion, ignorance, and all of their shades. So therefore, it's not possible for Buddha to deceive everyone. So the statements made by Buddha and by valid teachers such as Guru Rinpoche and the noble beings, they are reliable statements. So in the scriptures this is said, the statements of the Buddhas are reliable statements. They are valid, they're reliable, trustworthy. They are trustworthy words. They are free of all faults, free of all the faults of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Buddha has no personal interest, right? He's completely free from attachment, aversion, and so on. There's nothing that he needs or wants, so he has no reason to lie to anyone. When one is free of the three poisons, free of personal aim, when one has exhausted hope and fear, one will not lie. This is the case for on the mundane level or on the spiritual level, both. So in short, it's said, the statements made by the enlightened ones, they are valid statements, they're trustworthy words. And this word valid, we could also translate it more technically as valid cognition or pramana. And we talk in the scriptures about different types of valid cognition, direct, inferential, and so on and so forth. But without getting into these details, what we're saying is that the Buddha, being free of afflictions, is reliable, and everything he teaches is reliable because he has no reason, cannot possibly have any motivation to deceive anyone, because the causes for deceiving others, for disturbing emotions, are not present within Buddha's mind. The three jewels are identified differently according to the different categories of greater and lesser vehicles. Here in the unsurpassable tradition of the great vehicle, there are three categories of objects in which realization is manifest, and so on. So it's explained, as will be explained below, that from among the three jewels, who is the ultimate object of refuge from among the three jewels? Well, in the vehicle of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, at the level of the Shravaka teachings, it's explained that from among the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it is the Dharma that is the genuine refuge. From among Dharma of realization and transmission, or the truth of cessation and the truth of the path, it's the truth of cessation, the Dharma of realization that is the ultimate object of refuge. In the Mahayana teachings, though, it's understood that it's actually the Buddha it's only the Buddha, the state of enlightenment, that is the sole ultimate and genuine refuge. And the reasons for this will be explained further below. So, the objects in which realization is manifest. These are the jewel of the Buddha, who embodies the four bodies and the five wisdoms, who is endowed with the two purities, and is the ultimate fulfillment of the twofold goal. So the jewel of the Buddha is endowed with four bodies, the four enlightened bodies or kayas, and the five wisdoms. This is what you could say Buddha embodies these, or these are the identity of the enlightened state, the four kayas and five wisdoms. Buddha, or the enlightened state, is endowed with the two purities which are the original purity and purity from adventitious stains. And And moreover, Buddha is the ultimate fulfillment of the twofold goal of self and others. So this is the definition or the essence or characteristics of Buddha, the first of the three jewels. Then we have the jewel of the Dharma. Dharma is comprised of the Dharma of realization and transmission, the cessation and the path, included in the truth of untainted complete purity, and the excellent words that express it as perceptible words and letters. And then we have the Sangha. And all these points are explained. If we want to learn about them talk about them in more detail, then we need to refer to the Uttara Tantra, the Sublime Continuum. It's explained that Buddha is endowed with 8 qualities. Condensed into the fulfillment of the twofold goal of self and other. So it said Buddha is endowed with wisdom, love, and power from the perspective of the way things appear, and other qualities, making a total of 8. What is the jewel of Dharma like? The Dharma is comprised of the cessation and the path, the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And in the Uttara Tantra it's explained it's explained that Dharma is endowed or comprised of 8 qualities. She listed the qualities quoting from Uttara Tantra. So sisters say that for more detail on the nature of the 3 jewels, then we should refer to Uttara Tantra, where the nature of the 3 jewels is explained in much more detail than we have here. So Rinpoche is going through these 8 qualities as I listed in Uttara Tantra, just not able to quite keep up. So the Dharma is comprised of the Dharma of realization and Dharma of transmission. So the qualities of realization and also the transmission of that realization as expressed in words and letters. So these days the teachings are, instead of being printed in Pecha format, the traditional Pecha format, they're being printed in book format, and everyone loves books for their convenience and so on, including me. But this is actually really not good. Our Dharma text should remain in Pecha format. In traditional Pecha format with Pecha covers and name tags. Says one master, Dzogchen, I missed the name, but all the texts in his library were wrapped up very nicely in fine cloths with brocade name flaps in the front, as is traditionally done. But then this master, his edition of the 7 treasuries of Longchenpa, he had wrapped in the finest pure silken brocade and always placed at the top of the stack. And if some people would come to his library, some students, they would take out books, and when putting them back, place them on top of the 7 treasuries. He would say, no, you mustn't place anything on top of the 7 treasuries. They must always be on the very top. So these 7 treasuries of Longchenpa, there's nothing more sublime than those teachings. Pacha Rinpoche said this himself, right? So when it comes to Dharma teachings, we should keep them in the traditional Pecha format, and Kimpa Daso Rinpoche would emphasize this. Book format is like the format that people use in school, or like for secular subjects. It's so convenient. It doesn't really inspire reverence. You just open the book, so easy. Then you slap it closed. When you're finished, you put it in your back pocket, and then you walk along. And then when you sit down, maybe if you can sit on top of it. This is how you see the school kids treat their school books. So. And it's only in recent decades, only very recently, that actually people started printing the Dharma texts in book format. So book format just does not inspire faith and devotion. So when we visualize the refuge tree or the field of accumulation, for instance, it said you should visualize all of the Buddhist teachings in Pecha form, wrapped up in fine cloths and resounding with the sound of Ali Kali, the vowels and consonants. Do you think a stack of books, just an ordinary book format, would inspire that same kind of visualization or perception? So anyway, Pecha format is important. The Sangha, the true Sangha of sublime Bodhisattvas and the great levels, children of the Buddha endowed with the qualities of realization and liberation, and the surrogate Sangha of beings following the great vehicle on the paths of accumulation and so on. These comprise the Sangha. So, with this, Kyabje Chögyam Rinpoche has identified for us what are the essence of the 3 jewels, what are the essence of the 3 jewels of Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha in whom we go for refuge, what are their characteristics, what exactly are we taking refuge in. And as taught in the Uttara Tantra, the Buddha is that endowed, the state of enlightenment endowed with 8 qualities. The Dharma is that endowed with 8 qualities, and so on. The Sangha is endowed with 8 qualities of realization and liberation. So these are the objects, the 3 jewels in which realization is manifest. So these are the 3 jewels, the objects of refuge of the greater vehicle. Sources of inspiration. All fashioned images representing the Buddha, for example, drawings or paintings and statues. So on our shrines and altars, we place statues and images of the Buddhas and the enlightened ones as objects for our reverence and prostration. Then we have another source of inspiration are books containing the Dharma teachings in the form of letters, and the Sangha of ordinary beings following the path. When we talk about the jewel of the Sangha, we're referring mainly to those holding the bhikshu vows, as well as the sort of full monastic vows, the novice vows, and so on. These are objects of reverence and respect. These are objects worthy of homage. someone who really is maintaining one of these levels of vows, they are objects worthy of reverence and respect. Just someone with grey hair wearing like Ngapa robes with grey hair, just the fact that they have grey hair and wrinkles and are older, that doesn't make them any more holy. It's whoever's done more practice and is endowed with greater qualities, they are more worthy of respect. These days, it's often the case that the older practitioners, regardless of what practice they've done, what vows they have, they're immediately regarded as being like more sacred, more worthy of respect and put at the head of the row. But it should not just automatically go like that. But in a lot of places, these are how people are doing things. They just put the oldest people at the head of the row. But actually, and then you end up with younger people, but people who've been holding their vows for longer and so on at the bottom of the row, and it's not correct. So there are these and many other points that actually are very important to mention, to understand and mention and point out. But nevertheless, these days, maybe they don't appeal to people. People aren't so willing to accept them. It's just the current climate, right? A lot of things like about hierarchy and gender and seniority and so on are very sensitive topics, and so it's kind of difficult to talk about some things that are nevertheless important to talk about. So what to do? The Sangha are ordinary beings following the path. These are the lesser Sangha of lay practitioners and intermediate ordinees, we can say those with novice vows, and the so-called greater Sangha of fully ordained monks, bhikshus, four such taken together being called an assembly of the Sangha. So there's a story we find in the sutras from Buddha's time there was a king or someone at the time who was just really like intractable, really stubborn person. Even Buddha could not inspire him and turn his mind to the Dharma. And there was one of Buddha's students, a very eminent student, whose conduct was so perfect. He was so disciplined and self-controlled, and he followed Buddha's Vinaya to the dot. And this conduct inspired this king who hadn't even been inspired by Buddha Shakyamuni. And he said, you are so extraordinary. Are you your own teacher, or do you have a teacher actually? And he said, oh yes, I have a teacher. My teacher, my root guru is Buddha Shakyamuni. And this king was amazed. Are you saying Buddha Shakyamuni is superior than you? So this just goes to show that the conduct is very important. Conduct inspires others. Because conduct is an expression of one's inner conduct and comportment, and it's really important in inspiring others. So, as it says here, 4 fully ordained monks taken together qualifies as an assembly of the Sangha. If you have 100, say, novice monks or 100 lay students, that does not qualify as the Sangha in this context. Even 1,000 tantrikas does not qualify as the Sangha from the perspective of the Vinaya. So, to say the Sangha is present, you must have at least 4 fully ordained monks. At a certain level of teachings, this is how it is. There's also the Sangha of knowledge holders, comprising those, whether monks or lay practitioners, who are following the path of the mantra vehicle and abide by the commitments. And it says here, the Sangha of knowledge holders, when you don't become a knowledge holder just by having long hair and wearing a striped zen and so on. Knowledge holder refers to someone who has actually mastered the generation and completion stage practices, who has mastered the tantric practice. So as it says in the treatise on the 3 vows, the greatest type of Vidyadhara or knowledge holder is the one who also possesses the bhikshu vows. Middling is one who possesses the novice monastic vows, and the inferior is the knowledge holder of Vidyadhara, who is a lay person. So the lay practitioners are at the bottom of the row. But then the 3 treatises on the 3 vows says, he who is endowed with primordial wisdom, however, is always supreme. So if one has realized primordial wisdom, then regardless of what level of vow you have, you are essentially the supreme type of Vidyadhara holder. Whichever discipline they observe, these are all fields by which beings may acquire merit. These are all objects of homage and reverence, and fields of merit in the sense that by paying respect to these objects, these Sangha members, we can generate enormous merit. Then we come to the absolute object of refuge. The ultimate refuge is Buddha alone. So from among the 3 jewels, it's only the Buddha. The Buddha alone is the ultimate or absolute object of refuge. Neither of the other 2 is the ultimate refuge for the following reasons. Once one has seen the truth, the teachings that make up the Dharma of transmission have to be discarded. And this is explained in the Uttara Tantra with lines that are quoted below. The Uttara Tantra, or the Sublime Continuum. Neither the Dhamma nor the Sangha are the ultimate refuge. It's only the Buddha who is the ultimate refuge. So, why? Once one has seen the truth, the teachings that make up the Dharma of transmission have to be discarded. The Dharma of transmission is like a boat. Once you reach the far shore, you have to leave the boat behind, right? The Dharma of transmission is like that. It gets you somewhere. It gets you to the destination, but it's not the destination. It has to be discarded in the end. So there's a lot of debate, a scholastic debate around these points. What is the absolute refuge and why and so on. And in connection with that, there is a lot of debate about the truth of the path. From among the four truths, the truth of the path, is it conditioned in nature or unconditioned? One day, Kimbochi Rinpoche got up and he announced in the morning, so today I will establish the path, the truth of the path, as conditioned. And he gave this extraordinary presentation establishing the truth of the path as conditioned in nature. Then the following day, he said, now I will establish the truth of the path as unconditioned. And he gave again an astounding presentation establishing with logic and so on how the truth of the path is unconditioned. So that anecdote continued, but I guess some finer points about this issue of whether the truth of the path is conditioned or unconditioned and how that distinction has to be made, and so on and so forth. These are important things to think about for the scholars in the audience. The Dharma of realization in the minds of bodhisattvas, listeners, and solitary realizers is subject to improvement, and it's therefore impermanent and deceptive. So, the bodhisattvas, listeners, and solitary realizers, in short, they have not yet, even on the bodhisattva bhumis, they have not yet completely removed all discards. They haven't abandoned all the obscurations that need to be abandoned, and they have not yet completed or perfected their realization. So, in this way, as they ascend from, even with the bodhisattvas, as they proceed from the first bhumi up to the 10th and so on, their realization is improving, and therefore it's impermanent, and that word is impermanent, it's deceptive, it cannot be relied on. So the Dharma of realization too is impermanent and deceptive. It's not an absolute refuge. So the Dharma of transmission has to be discarded, just like a boat is discarded once you reach the far shore. And the Dharma of realization, present in the minds of bodhisattvas and so on, it's subject to improvement as they progress on the path up to and until they reach perfect enlightenment. So therefore that Dharma of realization too is impermanent and deceptive. And in the Uttara Tantra, the Sublime Continuum, these points are illustrated with examples or similes. Anyway, as for the Sangha, since its members are themselves still on the path to be trodden, they don't have the ultimate qualities. And since they're unable to eliminate their latent tendencies and the obscurations particular to their respective levels without depending on the Buddha, they still have fear. Like the Sravaka or Prachika Buddha or Bodhisattva on the bhumis, they are still subject to certain obscurations, 4 types of obscurations. And until they reach even at the last moment of the 10th Bodhisattva Bhumi, they are still veiled by certain obscurations. And without depending on the Buddha, they're unable to abandon these obscurations, so they still have fear. Without receiving the empowerment of great light at the end of the 10th Bhumi, they're not able to abandon these obscurations themselves. And as I said, all of these points are explained in greater detail in the Sublime Continuum, where we also find various examples. The example of fire with smoke and so on, used to illustrate each of these points. So a lot of you, a lot of the scholars here will be very, very familiar with all these points. And if you want to go into them in more detail, then you can look at the commentaries on the Sublime Continuum, Maitreya's Uttara Tantra, and a few of these commentaries Rinpoche mentioned. There's a commentary, a commentary on the Uttara Tantra or connected to it, which is recently uncovered, and which many scholars, I think, uncovered by Khenpo Palden Sherabs, some of whose disciples, Western disciples, are here. And everyone was very excited by this discovery of this text. And a lot of people have attributed it to Longchenpa. Some still have some doubt whether the author really was Longchenpa or not. So teachers like Khenpo Pema Sherab and others have attributed the text to Longchenpa. But in any case, whether the author is Longchenpa or not, the commentary is really precious and excellent. The ultimate or consummate Dharma, we could say, is the Buddha, and the consummate Sangha also, we could say, is Buddha. So, as Buddha himself said, the Muni, the Buddha, the Muni, meaning the Muni means the capable one capable of dispelling the afflictions. The Muni cannot wash away stains, wash away suffering like with water, but by introducing you to the ultimate reality, the way things are, and can show you the path to liberation. So that's to say that the ultimate object of refuge is Buddha alone. Now we'll discuss the particular refuge objects of the mantra vehicle. So on page 144, according to the tradition of the diamond mantra vehicle, or the Vajrayana, there are, in addition to the above, the particular three jewels: the teacher, the yidam, the dakinis, and dhamma protectors. So we distinguish the teacher, the gurus, as the embodiments of all three jewels. So understanding the guru's body is the Sangha, speech is the Dhamma, and mind is the Buddha. The yidam deities, manifesting in their peaceful and wrathful forms, is the nature of the Buddha in the body of perfect enjoyment or Sambhogakaya and body of manifestation Namanakaya. Their tantras as the extraordinary Dhamma, and their dakinis and Dhamma protectors as the special Sangha. So when we say their tantras as the extraordinary Dhamma, like the Guyagabha Tantra, for instance, the Guya Samaja, Kalachakra Tantras, these are tantric teachings, and the dakinis and Dhamma protectors as a special Sangha. When we talk about dakini, we can talk about many different types of categories of dakinis, karma dakinis, dakinis of the different families, and so on and so forth. The Lord Teacher is the root of blessings, the Yidam deity is the source of accomplishments, the dakinis are those who perfectly grant the blessings. So here Chushan Rinpoche quotes lines of Guru Rinpoche's teachings. The Guru Rinpoche, so when it says the Great Master here and elsewhere, it's referring to Guru Rinpoche. I think these are taken from, I didn't get to check. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they're from the supportive teaching, the light of wisdom, the supportive teaching, Guru Rinpoche's teaching called the light of wisdom. Now we come to the resultant object of refuge. This is one's own mind, which is the union of emptiness and clarity. Naturally, that is to say, the state of great perfection. This is the refuge that we take in, for instance, a Jujum Trima practice. One's own mind, which embodies the essential nature, the natural expression and compassion, present from the very beginning. This is the nature of the three jewels. The empty essence, luminous nature, and unimpeded capacity. So that's what's meant here by essential nature, natural expression, and compassion. And to understand that in more detail, then one needs to study Garabdojis, the three vital words, and so on. It's not wouldn't be appropriate. We don't have the time, and it also wouldn't be appropriate. It's not the context to talk about such things here. So when the nature of one's own mind, which is empty in essence, luminous in nature, and unimpeded in its compassionate capacity, when this nature is made fully manifest, then that is none other than the state of enlightenment. So she was kind of pondering what certain words and phrases here might mean. Anyway, it doesn't relate directly to our English translation, but in that light, it's important to. It's best to be very careful about composing, to hesitate before composing Dharma texts or composing anything. Like Patrul Rinpoche said, when amidst people, then keep your mouth closed. When in a market, keep your hands clasped, something like that. So be careful about what you say, basically. Then you might say, well, Rinpoche, how can you say that when you yourself have written a book? Well, it's true, I've written a book. But I mainly wrote it at the encouragement of some of my teachers, but also specifically for the benefit of some, like, international students who would be new to the Dhamma. In any case, to compose lots of like philosophical texts, Dhamma texts these days. It's difficult to compose something that is actually adding anything. I think that's the main point. One of the main things Rinpoche is saying is difficult to compose something that is actually contributes to the existing literature. So there are so many new compositions these days, commentaries on this and that philosophical treatise and so on. But it seems few of these new compositions are really that valuable. And anyway, personally, I just focus on reading the works of the great masters like Longchenpa and so on. And I do not read anything by contemporary teachers, by contemporary scholars. Just focus on the canonical works. In order to realize that one's own mind is the nature of the three jewels, one adopts the causal refuge, or most importantly, rather than looking for refuge elsewhere, for it's spontaneously present within oneself, one settles naturally in the uncontrived, unchanging state of one's own mind. So just to backtrack, these things I'm saying about, like what I just said about composition and so on and so forth, all of these I'm saying okay, forget that. So back to the text. One settles naturally in the uncontrived, unchanging state of one's own mind without adopting or rejecting anything. This is the result in refuge. So this is basically the state of the great perfection, the practice of the great perfection. That's what we're talking about here. The mind free of anything to be purified and anything to be attained is the Buddha. Its unchanging nature, free from stains, is the Dharma, and so on. Regarding the etymology of the term jewels in this context, the word jewel was translated as rare and supreme. on account of its preciousness and its six analogous features, as presented in the Sublime Continuum, the Uttara Tantra. So the three jewels of Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha are called jewels, or as translated into Tibetan, rare and supreme. Of course, when we translate the Tibetan back into English, we've reverted to the Sanskrit, right, jewel. But the Sanskrit Ratna was translated into Tibetan as Kuncho, which means literally rare and supreme. So rare because the three jewels are rare, like jewels, like precious jewels. Of course, the three jewels of Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha are much rarer and more precious than just precious gems like star sapphire and so on and so forth. That goes without saying. So the three jewels occurrence is rare because beings in the world who have not given rise to sources of good will not come across them even in many, many kalpas. Above this we have a verse taken from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. The 5 treatises of Maitreya are extraordinary texts. The Regent Maitreya, the Buddha of the Future, the 5th guide of our eon. These treatises which we have in our world, they're just extraordinary texts. And all these points, as well as explanation of the 6 features here, these points are explained in the Sublime Continuum. So it's as a result of purifying obscurations and accumulating merit in past lives that we now find ourselves exposed to the 3 jewels, connected to the 3 jewels. Without that, it would not have been possible. It would not be possible for us to encounter the 3 jewels, for them to appear in our experience or appear in this world. So it's only by extensive purification, extensive merit, that we gain the fortune to encounter the 3 jewels. This isn't something that occurs just randomly or by coincidence. The 3 jewels are immaculate because they're entirely unstained by faults. They are powerful because they possess inconceivably powerful qualities, such as the 6 kinds of preternatural knowledge, the preternatural knowledge, or we could say higher perception or clairvoyance, of sight and hearing and so on. What this really means, preternatural knowledge or clairvoyance, it means to know clearly, to see vividly or know vividly. So things that are not apparent to others are apparent to those with this kind of supernatural knowledge. And therefore they can dispel the troubles of the world. In the teachings of Semanamja, the Pramana teachings, there's a discussion about how the Buddha is omniscient. So when Buddha Shakyamuni was alive, there were some non-Buddhist teachers who doubted this claim that Buddha was omniscient, that he knew everything. And there's one story of how 500 such non-Buddhist teachers got together. They each got a piece of wood and made some coal, or like, what would you call it? Yeah, say coal, that's not the right word, but anyway, that wood, and then each took these pieces to Buddha and said, identify which of these come from where. which is whose and so on. And Buddha identified all 500 absolutely perfectly. So these and other stories that illustrate Buddha's omniscience, his limitless knowledge. They ornament the world, the three jewels ornament the world because there's a source of all beings' positive wishes. This Buddha is also sometimes described as a captain or someone who steers the wheel. In what way does Buddha steer us? He steers us away from the world towards the Dharma. He steers beings' minds towards the Dharma, towards the state of enlightenment. That's why he's called the steersman. Said that after Buddha manifested enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, then 95% of the Indian population of the Indian subcontinent became Buddhist followers. So at some point, perhaps around the time of King Ashoka, around 95% of the whole subcontinent was Buddhist. So to that extent, beings were guided or steered by Buddha, but then because of various causes and conditions and the changing course of time, then that number decreased, right? They are supreme, superior to counterfeit jewels because they have supramundane qualities. The three jewels of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha have transcendental, supramundane qualities. They are superior to counterfeit jewels, like pure free of all impurity, all artifice. They are unchanging, unaffected by circumstances such as praise or criticism. Buddha is completely unmoved by praise or criticism. Khenpo Rinpoche was like this. He was not interested in praise at all. He actually didn't like, not just that, he didn't like praise. He would get quite riled when people would praise him. If people praised him and said, "Oh, you're so learned, you're such a great renunciate, you're this and that," then he would just respond, if they think I'm so great, if they think I'm great because I'm some renunciate and they think that's such a good thing, then why don't they live the same way? You know, if they think that's such a great quality, then they can adopt that quality themselves. So it said a good lama should be like a stone. Like a stone, you know, you can turn it this way or that way, but it just remains a stone. It doesn't change, right? So Khenpo Rinpoche was like that. Also Jojo Rinpoche and so on, these great masters are like that. They're just unmoved by praise, criticism, this and that. They just remain as they are. Jojo Rinpoche, the late Jojo Rinpoche, someone like me, we followed Jojo Rinpoche for like 30 plus years. But still, it seems we didn't quite identify or grasp his qualities. There was a foreign student who spent just like a year with Jojo Rinpoche and just managed to sum up his qualities perfectly. There was some interaction. This Westerner had been the sponsor for like 40 or 50 retreat huts up in Yolmo, and then went to see Jojo Rinpoche, and you know, another student took them to Jojo Rinpoche and said, "Oh, Rinpoche, you know, this Western student has sponsored all these retreat huts up for us in Yolmo and has been helping us so much." saying, well, they've contributed so much, they've been offering so much support. And I guess that Western student, it's just kind of expected Dodro Rinpoche to respond with some praise or some encouragement or some thanks or something, to give them a kata or something. That's kind of natural expectation. And all he said after all of this praise being showered down upon this person and being updated on what she'd done, Dodro Rinpoche just sat there and he said, oh yeah, okay. Like he was completely unmoved. Completely unmoved. And I guess the student was a bit affronted. And later on they said, Dodro Rinpoche, I don't know with what motivation they said this, but the Western student said, Dodro Rinpoche, he has no feelings. And when I heard that, I thought, you've nailed it. That is exactly what Dodro Rinpoche is. He has no feelings. No feelings means he's beyond thought, beyond conceptual thought. Just as it said, when conceptual mind ceases, Dhammakaya manifests. That's what Dodro Rinpoche was like. So this Western student, they kind of managed to assess Dodro Rinpoche very quickly. Dodro Rinpoche has no feelings, they said, exactly. So thus the three jewels are rare and supreme in these ways. The three jewels' excellent qualities can also be found in greater deal in texts such as the Sutra Remembering the Three Jewels and their commentaries. The duration for which one takes refuge. Beings take refuge for different lengths of time. So in general, worldly people take refuge until they've achieved their own minor goals. So maybe they take refuge because they're sick and they want to get better. So they take refuge until they're better. Or even in the case of the listeners in solitary realizers, one takes refuge for as long as they live. So when one takes one of the personal liberation vows, one pledges to take it for the duration of that life. Because it's said that, as it's explained in the Abhidhamma, the personal liberation vows, in short, it's understood that the vows are have a kind of material existence, and one can only attain those vows. The support for attaining those vows is one's physical support, one's physical body. So therefore, the vows, personal liberation vows, only remain for as long as one is alive, as long as one has this physical body. Anyway, all these details are explained in the Abhidhamma. In our case, that of the great vehicle, we take refuge until we attain enlightenment. As we read in the way of the Bodhisattva, until the essence of enlightenment is reached. That is how long we take enlightenment for. The essence of enlightenment means the state of Buddhahood. It's until reaching that state that we take refuge. The manner in which one's protected. So how do the three jewels protect us when we take refuge in them? How do they grant us refuge? How do they protect us? The Buddha protects us as the ultimate refuge and guide. The Dhamma protects us in serving as the path, because practicing what the Buddha taught frees us from fear. So the Buddha, we take refuge in the Buddha, perceiving him as the guide, the Dhamma as the path, the Sangha as the companions. The Sangha protects us in acting as a companion, leading the way. In the secret mantra vehicle, the teacher performs all the activities of the three jewels, and is therefore the embodiment of all three jewels. So this is very clear, right? So these points I've already covered. I covered at the beginning of the session when giving an overview, a kind of framework for refuge, what it means to take refuge. And I've already touched on these and other points. So hopefully you understood the overview that I gave. So the ritual for taking the refuge vow. Initially one takes the vow from a spiritual friend, from one roots guru, who is a pure object. So a pure object best is bhikshu, or kempo and so on. You can also take the vows from Mangapa. Subsequently one takes refuge as the need arises and data prompts one to do so. So, for instance, if you encounter some danger and it looks like you're close to death, then you should take refuge again. And 6 times a day, in either case, visualizing the object of refuge in front of one and taking refuge. So, when taking the personal liberation vows, one must take them from an object, from a teacher. And this helps actually. Taking the vows in front of another person helps us to develop a sense of modesty and shame and caution with regard to observing those vows. The Bodhisattva vow ideally is taken from a person as well, from in the presence of a teacher, but it's also taught that the Bodhisattva vow can be taken in the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas visualized in front of you. So there is this distinction here, distinction between how the refuge and personal liberation vows should be taken, the personal liberation vows should be taken, and the Bodhisattva vows should be taken. So jumping back to the 70 verses of refuge, when I requested the transmission for Lojin Dameshiri's commentary on the 3 vows from Tushi Rinpoche said, okay, but I will also give you, he then just offered to also give me the 70 verses of refuge. Even though that's not what I had requested, he said I have a very rare line of transmission for this text, this very precious text in and of itself, and I also have a very precious line of transmission for this that I received from Tushi Rinpoche himself. And he explained the kind of where the lineage then also the history, the line of transmission, the history of the lineage for that. And I was delighted at the thought of being able to receive this transmission, and the fact that Tushi Rinpoche had just offered to give it to me without my requesting it. So I thought I was incredibly fortunate. How many other people are there to whom Tushi Rinpoche offered without being prompted or requested to give a special transmission? So I was delighted when he mentioned this, that he wanted to give me this transmission of the 70 verses of refuge, because for which he had a special transmission from Tushi Rinpoche. Anyway, later on, Tushi Rinpoche fell sick, and it ended. In the end, I wasn't able to receive the transmission from him. The time didn't come about. But actually, Tushi Rinpoche never forgot. When I saw him later, he was sick and not able to give them, but he didn't forget. He said, I remember you requested that transmission from me, and that I also want to give you the 70 verses of refuge. I haven't forgotten, but I'm just not well at the moment. So these great masters, their memory is extraordinary. So anyway, I didn't end up getting to receive those transmissions, but I felt lucky that Tushi Rinpoche agreed and offered to give them to me. And if some of you disciples of Tushi Rinpoche did receive that rare transmission of the 70 verses of refuge from Tushi Rinpoche, then you are so fortunate, and maybe that's something I need to receive still. So now the precepts of taking refuge. There are 2 parts, the actual precepts and the causes of the refuge ceasing. So as for the actual precepts, the special precepts, it's really important that we are all aware of what the refuge precepts are, what the refuge vows are. So first of all, precepts with regard to things one must avoid. Having taken refuge in the Buddha, you should not put your hopes in worldly gods and rely on them. So you should no longer take refuge in mundane spirits and worldly gods. If you do that, your refuge vow will degenerate, will be damaged. In Kham and other places, people often take refuge in the local spirits or the local gods. This is the same thing. They're worldly deities, so they should not. One should not take refuge in them once you've taken refuge in the Buddha. So likewise, these days, a lot of people putting photos of Sai Baba and Ramdev and so on up on their shrine, on equal standing with the Buddha and the three jewels. That is incorrect. And if you take refuge in such teachers, such gods, you're breaking your refuge vows. However, this doesn't preclude simply making offerings to them on an occasion in order to entrust them with certain activities related to the Dhamma. So to place your hopes in these gods is a mistake. You're breaking your refuge, but to make offerings to them, to propitiate them, in order to fulfill certain activities, then that's okay. After taking refuge in the Dhamma, you must avoid doing anything harmful to beings, killing, beating, harming beings in any way, so harming beings in thought or in deed. Once you've taken refuge in the Sangha, you must not keep company of those who hold non-Buddhist views. This is difficult these days. Almost wherever we go, we are surrounded by non-Buddhists. In the bus, in the restaurants, when traveling, wherever we go, most people we meet are non-Buddhists. So we can say there's no problem in being friends and acquaintances with non-Buddhists, getting along with them, keeping their company to some extent. But people who actually criticize the three jewels, who denigrate and criticize the three jewels and have a negative attitude to them, those people we should definitely avoid, like make a conscious effort to avoid. So no need to quarrel and fight with those people. If you meet someone who criticizes three jewels, no need to kind of fight back or get into an argument with them, but you can just slowly, skillfully distance yourself from them. Do not engage with such people. So non-Buddhists and those who criticize the three jewels, those who have negative views and no confidence in the three jewels, we should avoid such people. So these are the precepts, refuge precepts with regards to things one must avoid, things that are prohibited once we've taken refuge. Once you've taken the refuge vow, had your hair cut and so on, then these are the points you need to avoid. Now, what points do you need to adopt? Precepts with regard to things one should do, if even a fragment of a Buddha image and so on. Even a fragment of a Buddha image and so on must be treated respectfully, it goes without saying how one should treat any other aspects of the three jewels. So anything that represents the three jewels, even a fragment of cloth, should be treated with respect. It goes without saying that, therefore, that actual representations of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha should be treated with respect. They must not be placed on the floor in unclean places, stepped on, stepped over, sat upon. That is negative karma. That is very mistaken action, and even to kind of disrespect or be careless with just a few lines of printed Dharma text or a fragment of a Buddha image. That is also a mistake. The fact that these days the Buddha Dharma is fresh and alive The Buddha Dharma, as upheld in the Tibetan tradition, is fresh and alive and available to all of us all around the world, is due to the teachings, the kindness of the teachings, the presence of the teachings as they've been maintained by the masters over the centuries and upheld by the lineage masters century to century. The Dharma, this is to say, the teachings are so incredibly precious and valuable. It's the presence of the Dharma that guarantees the presence of the Buddha's teachings. So, this being so, we need to have utmost respect for the Buddha's teachings, and the Buddha's teachings, even just a single syllable of Buddhist teachings and Buddhist script. So these days, people have lines of Buddhist teachings or syllables and so on printed on their t-shirts, their trousers. And what does that mean? When you lie down, when you sit down, you're basically sitting on the Buddhist script. You know, if you have like Buddhist printed on your t-shirt or your trousers, when you lie down, what are you doing? You're lying down on top of Buddhist teachings. It is really negative action, careless and disrespectful action. And in recent years, there was some kind of, I don't know if it got to the courts, but there was a lot of kind of upheaval about certain fashion brands were like printing Buddha's image and so on shoes and even on the soles of shoes. And a lot of Buddhists objected to this because it's incredibly disrespectful. Of course, every script, not just the Tibetan language, is very precious because it's a vehicle for communication, but especially a vehicle for Buddhist teachings. But the Tibetan script is especially sacred. Why? Because it was created solely with the aim of transmitting Buddhist teachings. It was intentionally created with the sponsorship and support of the Buddhist kings in order to create a script to uphold and transmit Buddha's teachings. So it's not like other scripts, other alphabets. The Tibetan script is unlike other scripts. It wasn't developed for the sake of politics or mundane communication or the economy or what have you. It was developed solely for the sake of the Buddha Dharma, for spiritual reasons. So Chinese script and English script alphabets were developed with mundane goals in mind, right? Their history is quite different from the Tibetan script. So please keep this in mind. So this means we need to pay respect to the alphabet itself, to every syllable of text. So even half a verse of the sacred scriptures, even a few letters, even a yellow patch from the robe of a Sangha, like a little torn shred of a Dharma robe. So previously, lay people, women and lay people would not wear yellow. Why? Because yellow represented the Sangha, the monastic Sangha. So out of respect, people wouldn't wear yellow. But these days everyone just wears whatever they want. So, okay, that's maybe just a sign of the times, but still, one should pay respect to the ordained Sangha. This is really important. So this is not just something I'm saying, it's not my opinion, this is actually Buddha's own words, Buddha's own counsel, and Druzhyen Rinpoche's own instructions. We have it here on the page in front of us, right? Even a yellow patch from the robe of a Sangha member must be treated respectfully. So anyone who is wearing the Buddhist robes, whether they be a ngakpa, a tantrika, or a monastic, once they're wearing robes, they are representing the Buddha. So as Buddhist followers, we should pay respect to those robes. It's not an issue of necessarily paying respect to the individual. Individually, you're paying respect to the robes that represent the Buddha. So anyone who is wearing robes, they should be treated respectfully and with reverence. Again, it's not an issue of paying respect to that individual necessarily, but to the robes that represent Buddha. So these days you see so many people, lay people, just treating monastics and teachers, khenpos and geshes, just like ordinary people, like putting themselves on an even level with them, walking in front of them on the street, not making way from them, just like barging in front of them, brushing past them on the path, and when they meet them, instead of greeting them with their palms joined out of like a respectful gesture like that, they just stick their hand out like to shake their hand in this like secular, mundane way. That's not the way that like lay students should not treat the monastic sangha like that, and the monastics also shouldn't engage like that. So this respect and reverence is so important. It's really important, and it's really excellent. It's a really excellent thing to show respect and reverence for all those wearing Buddhist robes, all those upholding the novice and full monastic vows. This is a really wonderful custom. Again, Sri Lanka, I think I'm just saying the wife of the president or prime minister and his wife show enormous respect to all those wearing Buddhist robes, to the Buddhist Sangha, bowing down, placing their head at the feet of the monastic Sangha. That is so wonderful, right? Showing that kind of reverence to the monastic Sangha. The wise will always venerate any Buddha statues, even made of wood. Once you've taken refuge in the Dharma, you must respect all books containing the Buddha's teachings and their commentaries, and avoid such things as criticizing them with sectarian intentions. In the final period of 500 years, Buddha said this: in the final period of 500 years, I'll be present in the form of scriptures. I will manifest in the form of scriptures, consider them therefore as identical to me, and show them due respect. So what do the scriptures teach us? They teach us what is correct and incorrect, how to traverse the path. So this is the Buddha manifest in the form of scriptures. After taking refuge in the Sangha, you must respect not only pure monks and upholders of the 3 baskets, but also anyone who retains merely the signs of ordination, and avoid any disdain or prejudice with regard to them. In the past, in Bhutan, when the Rinpoche was giving the Rinchen Tezu empowerments, and you know, when every day during the ceremonies and so on, like here also in the morning, people stand up and read like a very kind of eloquent, majestic kind of speech announcing the offerings and making the supplication and so on. And some people really make beautiful compositions to this end. But often maybe it's more a case of people just like plagiarizing each other endlessly, taking a few lines from here, a few lines from there, and making something that looks nice. Anyway, one day someone stood up to read out the composition, and Dudar Rinpoche just started laughing, sitting there on the throne. He was like trying to cover his face with his hands because he was laughing. It was because someone had just basically done this, copied from here and there, but copied in such a way that they created something completely ridiculous that made Dudar Rinpoche just burst into laughter. You who dwell among those who desire good qualities, do not try to find fault in others. Don't seek out fault in others. One time in a school there was a monkey in a cage with its eyes covered, its ears covered, and its mouth covered. And why? This was the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, do not look at the faults of others. Don't listen to all the gossip of others, just focus on what you need to do. And don't talk a lot. Instead of talking a lot, get on with your work. So practice instead of preach. So, and then there was a monkey in a cage to illustrate these edicts of Mahatma Gandhi. In this school, they'd got a monkey and covered its eyes, ears, and mouth to illustrate this. I'm not sure that was necessary to illustrate it, but. But we need to do this. We need to, in a sense, blinker our eyes so that we not look for faults in others. Don't think I'm especially sublime, I'm the best. Pride like this is the root of all carelessness, so never disrespect any monk as your inferior. So don't look down on monks sitting at the bottom of the row, or those who aren't very educated and so on. We can never tell who is realized and who has what qualities. You cannot judge a book by its cover. So if you make judgments of people and you disrespect them, well, in the end, you could find yourself in a very embarrassing situation. You could have criticized someone greatly realized or very learned. So Buddha himself spoke about this, how ordinary beings cannot tell who is a noble being. You cannot tell just from appearances who is realized, who is developed or not. And Buddha also said, better than, like, to really paraphrase, better than 500 fancy people is one simple person who has taken refuge in the Buddha. We dedicate the merit now and stop here for today.